Who did you have to become just to feel loved? Hi, I'm Dr. Gary Salyer, and welcome back to the Safe to Love Again podcast. If you're listening to this, I guess you probably do most things very well. You built a career, earned respect, maybe built a family. And somewhere underneath all of it, love still doesn't quite land the way you hoped it would. By the time we're done today, you're going to have a name for something you've probably felt for years without ever quite putting words to it. That quiet sense of living a short distance from your own life. You're going to understand why love may never have fully reached you, even when the people around you called you smart, capable, admired, or loved. And you're going to see that this was never a flaw in you. In fact, it was your brain doing something remarkably intelligent to keep you safe. You're also going to walk away able to recognize the very identity you built in the hope of finally being loved, or maybe just being safe. And I want to tell you something that most people never expect to hear. The self you once had to leave behind, that part of you that knows you've got a truer self than you have now, that self was never destroyed. Yes, that's true. It's still yours. And finding your way back to it is exactly where we're headed today, together. We're going to get to it in here in a second, but let me tell you a story first. And it just might be your story too. James Joyce, the great literary writer, once wrote about a character. Mr. Duffy lived a short distance from his body. The phrase captured the detached and emotionally constrained existence this character portrayed in the short story, A Painful Case. Joyce was describing something many people quietly recognize but rarely name: the experience of living slightly outside of oneself. Have you ever had that feeling? Something isn't quite right. This isn't exactly who I should be. Now, before we go further, I want you to just take a quiet moment and ask yourself something simple. Do I ever feel like I'm living slightly outside of my own life or my own truest self? Not dramatically, maybe not all the time, but just enough to notice it in the quiet moments. For years, I was Mr. Duffy. Perhaps you have been too. It is difficult to describe this feeling without sounding, dramatic, because it rarely announces itself openly. As life progresses, achievements are earned. We form deep relationships. Responsibilities accumulate, yet somewhere beneath the surface, there lingers a subtle impression that you are not fully inhabiting your own existence. At 3 a.m, or in moments of unexpected stillness, you may sense it. A faint but persistent question: how did I become this version of me? Or, is this who I really am? And if you've ever felt that question arise, not as a crisis, but as a quiet curiosity, you are already closer to yourself than you might think. The first time I felt it consciously was in junior high, to be honest, when I wondered how I had somehow become the school nerd. To solve the problem, I tried on a new identity. I became the athlete with the letter sweater, believing that if I could change the outer presentation, I might be able to change my inner experience. When that failed, later on, I became the campus intellectual, earning 4.0 semesters like clockwork, collecting praise that felt validating, but a little hollow. And that new identity promised belonging. I got praise, but it never quite felt like it was all I was meant to be. something always felt missing. It just didn't feel like home. Not home with myself, at least. And looking back, I can see how I took on all those identities. As a young child growing up with a volatile and emotionally unpredictable mother, I learned that emotions were often too dangerous to express. At 5 years old, I remember the day I shut down my feelings to survive the intensity of a rage. And that adaptation protected me from far greater psychological harm. Attachment theory calls this avoidant attachment. It's a way the brain minimizes vulnerability in order to preserve safety. At the time, that attachment style was my savior. As I often say, the brain always takes the best deal available in the moment. And over time, those best deals don't just shape behavior, they begin to shape who we believe we are, or maybe what we can be. But here is what I did not understand back then. Of course, what 5-year-old could. When the nervous system suppresses emotional capacities for safety, it does not eliminate them. It reorganizes around them. And over time, neural pathways that support emotional openness and expression and relationality and intimacy may be inhibited. At that time, other networks become reinforced. The ones supporting achievement, the ones supporting intellect or independence or emotional distance. And what begins as a brilliant adaptation and can often lead to success in life, in business, or in education, well, that brilliant adaptation can become an identity. A temporary gain can quietly become a long-term relational liability. And here's the deeper truth. What we later call our identity often reflects the relational permissions our brain learned were safe within early relationships or were not. By the time I was 22, I had constructed an identity organized around being the smart one. It was a self-definition fortified by academic success and reinforced by the faint hope that intelligence might one day translate into love. This identity lasted for decades and for a reason. Now, it might have not been intelligence for you. It might have been success, or it might have been looks, might have been beauty. Whatever it was, just put your own tag in here as I share my story. Now, where did that come from? When my mother would say it when I was 8, you have no common sense, but you sure are smart. The young child in me clung to the second half of that sentence as if it were a lifeline. If I could just be smart enough, perhaps I could earn something deeper like being loved. And of course, that translation never occurred. My intelligence brought intermittent praise, but it did not bring me love. This is the deeper problem with any false self. A false sense of yourself reinforces old safety patterns that once made perfect sense back then. What was once a functional and protective limitation, the best deal available back then, can quietly become a dysfunctional definition of who you are. My old identity as the smart one, which masked a deeper fear of being unworthy of love, told me how to function in life and love. And it led to a lot of 4.0 semesters. But relationally, it had some drawbacks. Rather than relate, I would debate. Rather than feel, I would fix. Rather than listen, I would persuade. There was a pattern of proving myself right rather than sensing what made a relationship right. I aimed to be convincing, never realizing the healing power of simple curiosity about the other person. Everything revolved around using my logical mind to try to lead me to love. I behaved in my relationships exactly as my identity prescribed, except now it wasn't protecting me. Those strategies were limiting me. And you know where that led me? To divorces. And here's the more painful truth. It took me years to fully understand that it wasn't my desire for love that was the problem. And that may be the case with you too. What it was, at least for me, and it is for a lot of the clients that I work with, it was the identity I had built to try to receive love from an emotionally unavailable mother, and that was the problem. It was an adaptation to something that wasn't in the room now, but it was back then, and it was the best deal back then. It was humbling to realize that after years of allowing this logical, smart, intellectual identity to guide me, then I needed both feeling and thinking in my relationships. That's not personal experience talking, mind you. That's neuroscience. Let me explain. The right hemisphere of your brain carries a broader capacity for relational attunement. It picks up context, and it's really great at picking up emotional signals, especially embodied emotional signals and understanding. Now, the left brain is the emissary, so to speak, with the language capacities to communicate in words what the right brain is sensing and feeling. Ian McGilchrist argues in his wonderful book, The Master and the Emissary, that the left brain is supposed to be the emissary, but the right brain is the true relational master, and it should lead. But in order to survive way back then, my brain learned to let my left brain, the emissary in its logic, allow it to lead, rather than the brain's relational master, the right hemisphere. And considering the findings from neuroscience, it wasn't even logical. How ironic that was. In trying to think my way into love, I had unknowingly moved from the very capacities that make love possible. In other words, it might have given me 4 O's, but it gave me F's in relationships. In other words, my false self that protected me so well back then had it backwards when it came to creating a lasting marriage. I only see this, by the way, about 100% of the time with clients who are really struggling in their relationships. That false self, organized around intellect, logic, and being right, became a setup for relational failure once I left the environment that required it. And that is the real pain beneath any false self. To love well, we need full access to the relational capacities of the entire brain. When one's identity restricts access to half of that system or to any relational capacity of a truly securely attached brain, intimacy always suffers. And while it may not be intellect for you, there may be other relational capacities that just were not so safe and your brain adapted otherwise. Those adaptations are the real problems now. So, what's your false self? What I'm talking about here is this creates this truncated view where we give up some things just in order to survive, creates a limiting and limited sense of yourself, a false self. And let's not consider this as an act of judging yourself. Rather, let's gently ask the question as a doorway into understanding how your brain and nervous system once learned to stay connected or maybe learned just how to survive. It might be the pretty one who is admired but never deeply known. It might be the giver who hopes with just enough generosity, they will finally earn an attuned love. Perhaps it's the powerless one without a voice, or the one who is always rejected, and so you have to have a few walls up. Take a moment to ask yourself, what identity have I been living inside of? Let's be clear here. We do not want to bash any false self. Without those early self-definitions, many of us would not have survived childhood or our earlier relationships, maybe as an adult. The so-called false self was not a dysfunction when it was formed. I want to be clear about that. Your brain was working exactly as designed, keeping you on the planet and protecting you until you found better circumstances. And every limiting identity is an adaptive safety pattern constructed by a brain and a nervous system doing its best to preserve attachment or even safety under less than perfect, constrained conditions. But what once protected you may no longer be serving you. So your false self isn't wrong, it's simply outdated. Let me give you an example of what I mean by that. Years ago, when I worked in retail, parents would place toys on a layaway plan in the spring because they couldn't pay for them at the time, and they were afraid the toy would get away. So employees like me would pull them from the shelves and store them safely in the back until December. The toy was not discarded. It was protected until conditions allowed it to be fully claimed. In much the same way, the brain can temporarily store aspects of your authentic self when those parts of us are not safe to express. It doesn't destroy them, it protects them, pulls them off the shelf, so to speak, but they're still there. And every protective identity is a kind of neural layaway plan. And the purpose of every such protection pattern is to keep our best self safe until later conditions allow us to reclaim it. So here's my point. Your authentic self is rarely destroyed, but it is often protected and tucked away by some wise part of your brain. And protection, by definition, implies the possibility of return and restoration, just like in those old-fashioned layaway plans. Today, and this is an invite for you too, I define my identity very differently. My intelligence is a gift I possess, not something I must be. It no longer classifies me, it no longer defines me, and there is far more to appreciate about Gary than Dr. Salyer. And that new identity opened the door to find the true love of my life. I knew I'd found the right woman when my wife said to me early in our dating, "Gary, I'm not reading your book now. I want to fall in love with Gary, not Dr. Salyer." 6 months later, she read it. Now, years ago, when my identity was the smart one, that might have felt disappointing. I might not have felt seen. But on the other side of restoring a secure attachment style, what's called an earned secure attachment style, I knew I had found gold. One thing I've come to see very, very clearly, it's hard to find a soulmate if you aren't fully inhabiting your true self. I can now stay present with both my strengths and limitations without organizing my entire identity around either. What once functioned as protection no longer defines me. That is what a secure identity begins to feel like. not perfection, not performance, not even protection, but feels like the integration of all parts of me. Even better, it feels like being fully inside your own life again, the person you were born to be. I no longer live a short distance from my best self. I can fully inhabit my best self, and that's what I want to offer you as we continue this series. I want you to learn how to inhabit your most full, wonderful best self so you can have both success and love and all the good things that you really deserve in life. Now, in future episodes, we'll explore together how attachment experiences shape neural permission slips, so to speak, for everyday experience and life and love, and how false selves form around those early adaptations. The ways your identity often stabilizes old identity patterns, and what truly allows us to reclaim our innate relational capacities that were never truly lost. If you have ever sensed that you are living a short distance from your body or your true self, if you feel like you're living a short distance from your emotions or your relationships, just remember that nothing is broken. Nothing. Your nervous system simply learned quite brilliantly how to survive back then. But this is now. So then the question is not, who are you? The question is how you learn to leave yourself. And that distance, once so necessary, might now be ready to soften. And the really great question to ask is your nervous system and brain and actually you ready to learn something new? Okay. Let's get started by taking an existential inventory. Maybe it's an identity inventory. Take a moment to feel into what your underlying identity might be. And remember, we can all have more than one false self. These identities are rarely spoken aloud, but they often shape how we move through life. Feel free to add your own intuitive knowing if you sense another identity that fits you. Just say them out loud. What I'm going to do is say a phrase, and I want you to say it out loud after me. And notice what you feel. It may feel like sadness or anger or anything in between. Notice what happens to your body as you say the following with me. And if you've got, just at least say it in your mind, if you can, say it out loud. I'm the special one because I'm so smart or spiritual. Just notice how you feel. Is that landing as true? I'm the accomplished one. I'm the helper. I'm the one who needs no one. I'm the independent one. I'm the anxious one. I'm the one you need me to be. Just resist the urge to judge any of these common identities and respect them for the protection they once offered. You might even thank them. So, which one of those, what I call false identities or false selves, are most like the person you needed to become to feel loved or safe early on in life or in another relationship as an adult? Which one feels most true, has been that adaptation you needed to become to feel loved or safe? Then gently ask yourself, is some part of me ready for a broader, more secure sense of who I am? Some part of me ready for a better sense of who I am? And if you've ever been handed a bigger label, like I'm anxious or avoidant, and worn it like a life sentence or an identity, that's pretty much the same thing, just at a larger scale. We'll get into that in the coming episodes. And if you'd like to take a deeper exploration of these false identities, I discuss them in far more detail in my book, Safe to Love Again, especially Chapter 2. Now, before you go, I want to leave you with something to sit with. This isn't homework. It's just a question. If the identity you just named isn't who you are, but only who you had to become to feel loved or safe, who might you become without it? What would it feel like to be loved, not for what you do, not for all of your successes, but simply for who you are underneath it all? That's what the rest of this series is going to help you find out. I'm so glad you're here. And if you found yourself in one of these identities, the smart one, the giver, the independent one, whichever one it was, I don't think that means something's wrong with you. I think it means you're finally ready to meet the self that was there before you had to become any of them. And that's exactly where we go in the next episodes. So if this episode found you, do one thing for me. Hit subscribe. And if you know someone who's checked every box except the one that matters most, the one about their true self, send them this episode. It might be exactly what they need to hear now. Until next time, keep coming home to your truest, most loving self, and keep coming home to real love.